Hi, I am Denise Newton Fitzpatrick. I am back. I made a video a few minutes ago in regards to the implied warranty of habitability. And I was talking about what constitutes violations of such a warranty, what it is. And if you're a renter, it's good to know this because many people that I talk to have never heard of the implied warranty of habitability. I've spoken with landlords, property owners. They haven't even heard of the implied warranty of habitability. Many of them haven't even heard of the what a reasonable accommodation request is. Have no idea. There have been landlords that have not heard of the covenant of quiet enjoyment, federal laws, not even have heard of the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, and other laws. And don't start talking about the 42 USC codes. That's federal statute. That's health and welfare. These people rent property and don't even know the laws behind property management. Some of them haven't heard of a building code or a housing code, or they don't even know many of them, what of the state landlord tenant statutes are, yet they are landlords and property management companies. Have you ever heard of such a thing? I remember when I brought the lawsuit against a government entity. And me and my son, we defeated them in a court of law. I've said that many times. You can still Google the initial part of the case online. And you take assistant housing director. She didn't even know what a reasonable accommodation request was. Had no clue any of the statutes that are designed to fight illegal housing discrimination. No wonder she violated the law. She didn't know what they were. You know, my dad always told me that knowledge is power. And it is. You can believe that. You can take that to the bank. And to be the greatest, since I'm a child of God and I believe in the word, everybody don't, as I use your name and say they are. But I believe in a true and living God. Now, you don't believe, you got to write no nasty comment. If you do, it don't make no difference. I can politicians know how. But I believe in a living God. So I believe the greatest knowledge that there is that of the Bible. I do know knowledge is power. And since many landlords don't know these laws and statutes, they assume that their tenants wouldn't have a clue. And maybe some of them do know, and they assume that the tenant doesn't. Because as an advocate for housing and a fighter for civil rights and human rights, I have to add human rights now. Let me stop for a minute. Because I'm not saying I'm one that have really followed Malcolm X or have listened to many of his speeches and his teachings, the Quran, Muslim, Islam, because I really haven't. I have had friends that were Muslim and I would sometimes listen to them, but I never really got into it. But I was listening to something the other night for some reason. Matter of fact, it was last night. It was Malcolm X speaking. And he said this. He said, they have not deprived us so much of our civil rights, but they have acted as though we don't have and we're not human. He broke it down. And I listened, I thought, I got to start. It's about human rights. That's a big deal. Let me go back to where I was. I won't talk too much about, but there's some things Malcolm X was saying that about some light, shed some light to me. He shed some light on some things, and light bulb went off in my head. Put it that way. But so not just power, and I know a lot of people aren't into fair housing. Especially with all this other stuff going on and been going on. But knowledge is power. My dad said something to me when I was growing up, and I forgot it. He said, if you don't know your rights, he was a teacher, and I mean, he taught a whole lot that I remember, but some reason these two stuck with me when he said that. And she said, I'm the youngest of 8. She said, you don't mistreat people because you don't know who might have to give you a glass of water. That's what she said. Daddy was always teaching some knowledge. He was always talking about some civil rights. I'm the youngest, and I got a big dose. I think I got a bigger dose of his teachings of civil rights than any of his others children. I mean, and years later, that's what it seems like to me. I don't hear any of them ever talk too much about civil rights, but I do. I am the fighter for civil rights. Well, yes, like Malcolm X, and human rights. Overall, a fighter for equality and fair treatment. I want to say today on this video, and I don't get a lot of subscribers. As you see, it's a small little channel, and it needs a lot of promotions, and I'm going to be doing that to get it out there, because my group PROV 319 gets its name from the Bible book of Proverbs and the verse 3:19. Proverbs 3:19 says, stand up, speak out, judge righteously or fairly, I've seen in some Bibles, and defend the legal rights of the lowly and the poor. Now, that doesn't mean that the work that I do as an advocate and a fighter for these rights, that it's just the lowly and the poor. But when we say poor, a lot of money, you can still be poor. Or you can have very little money and be rich. There's a part of the Bible that says, having nothing. The work that I do and my son as advocates and fighters for civil rights. Well, I said before, when you hear me say fight, we just act in harmony with our prayer, because our fighters, he fights our battles. That's how we defeated the government entity. Because the battle, they didn't know it. They looked at me in the courtrooms like, who's this woman? Oh, we used to run and go, nobody do it. Who's this woman? In the category she's in. She came in as a homeless woman back then, applying for these vouchers, and stuff. But who is she? Because we aren't used to this. And they would give me a looks in the courtroom like, not only does this woman have us in a courtroom, we're losing. Let's see if I have the pile. What I'm getting at right now is that knowledge is power. You don't have to like it, agree with it, what have you, but it's power. When landlords break the laws, the state landlord-tenant statutes, the state building code ordinances, the state housing code ordinances, the federal housing laws, including the Federal Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, or FHAA. There's a slew of other laws. And when government entities violate the Constitution, I'm getting really sick of the Constitution right now, because I'm going to go off a little bit on what I'm doing and mention the Breonna case. I mean, these constitutions, it's like these people are violating these constitutions, and the Constitution, it kind of needed to be a little bit more something. Let me go back to what I was talking. I'm a fighter for civil rights and human rights, so therefore, police brutality is also, we stand up against that too, because that's a civil rights violation. Police brutality is a civil rights violation. It's just a civil rights is a broad category, and it covers a lot of different things. People's civil rights are violated all the time, and they don't know it because they don't have the knowledge to know what the civil rights is and what the civil rights are, what they entail, like civil liberties, civil rights. What the civil liberties do: the right to vote, the right to freedom of speech, the right, the right, the right. It's also the right to fair housing. It also constitutes civil rights. But what point I am making is that if you listen to this video and you hear me talking about PROV 319, I am trying to get a large organization going, whereas we stand up, defend the legal rights of the lowly and the poor. I know how that feels to go through illegal discrimination or how I know. And when you start looking for advocates in that, it's very small because a lot of the advocates of big organizations, they take big cases. But PROV 319, we want that anytime somebody calls us or contacts us by email, any of the means of communication,